May I please have your full and undivided attention? It is time for the Paranormal Rundown. Hello, this is Cedric Dankworth Smythe. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome all fans of the paranormal, the supernatural, the unusual, the entertaining, the terrifying, the horrifying, and those things that go bump in the night and in the daytime too. This is the one and only Paranormal Rundown, where the lads, the gang of nerds, choose from over 2,700 carefully curated paranormal topics. Get ready for true, prime, grade A paranormal rundown as the lads discuss the old icehouse that should have been but wasn't haunted, camping at Waverly Hills, British child trafficking, and the car crash that never was. You have your tickets. Now get on board the Paranormal Rundown Express, heading for all places east and west and north and south. All places terrifying, horrifying, and arcane. Let's go.
One, two, three, begin. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. This is Vic Hermanson, back with the Paranormal Rundown. Today we have myself, we have Father Michael Birdsong, we have Deacon Josh Birdsong, soon to be Father Josh Birdsong. That's going to be weird. And, and we have David Griffith. And the Paranormal Rundown list today has evolved to 2,747 topics. And of course, I'm always prompted to say more than over 2,740 exciting and mysterious topics, which is an indication that somebody needs to figure out something else to do.
Well, you know what? I'm going to interrupt you there, and I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. It takes a very special individual to be able to sit. Now, I'm bragging on you, okay?
Okay.
It takes a very brilliant individual to be able to sit and come up with all these things. So I want to give honor to where honor is due, ladies and gentlemen. I want to acknowledge Vic in this endeavor. Because don't shake your head at me. I'm sorry. But I want to give honor where honor's due, because it those of you that may not know, a lot of people have been like I've been in the past. How hard can a podcast be?
Oh boy, it can be very hard.
Well, for a successful one, it's pretty damn hard.
Yes, it is.
I don't. If it wasn't for these guys and my son, and I'm just now getting started for ETC. I mean, I can't imagine. And you have took this up under you, pretty good bit.
Well, I don't know. I think pretty sure the term that Vic used 2 episodes back was insanity.
And hello.
Well,
it takes a measure of that.
Yeah, it takes a measure of insanity sometimes to deal with certain parts of life. And I finally figured this out. Okay. I am, unfortunately, and I'm not trying to brag, what you call an intellectual. Meaning that at about age 6, I realized that there are people in the world who spend their time learning and writing and thinking and talking and discussing and debating things. And I didn't want to be a hockey player. I didn't want to be a football player. I wanted to be one of those guys. Mm-hmm. Which is kind of weird if you think about it. And so in the effort of becoming an intellectual, I began to see that a lot of people who call themselves that just broke the world into pieces and said, you know what, this part matters. All this other stuff, it doesn't matter at all. And generally the paranormal or the odd stuff was in the part of the world that to them didn't matter at all. Well, I think it matters. And that's, so I've spent time trying to figure out how to get a decent level of knowledge about all these areas of the world. And that includes the paranormal.
Oh, and that is why you are the backbone of this podcast, Vic, because me and my ADHD brain just wandered in and out of the intellectuality of life as it comes. I'm like, well, okay, this looks interesting today.
Well, I've got a little bit of that too, but all right. I believe we have a pretty good first selection, and it really is a first selection. I mean, I haven't cheated. Okay, this is just what came up. Got 6 topics. That's how we do things at the Paranormal Rundown. We take 6 topics and we decide that there's one we'd like to talk about. All right, topic 1, the wow signal, which is the strongest published SETI signal, but there have been others. Topic 2, bogus or phantom social workers or health inspectors, which was a phenomenon that happened in England. Sometime starting, I think, in the 70s or so. Topic 3, are there any actual paranormal experts? Topic 4, the Icehouse, which is a personal story of mine. It was a very scary place. Topic 5, the Frog War. You've heard, of course, about the Frog War, the horrible casualties of the Frog War. And topic 6 is memories from the womb.
Oh, wow. Okay. There's a few of those that are interesting, but because of what you said, I want to hear about the Icehouse.
Hello, this is Avalon Leanne Dankworth Smythe, the ever so genteel and classically educated keeper of arcane knowledge at the Paranormal Rundown. Instead of subjecting you to a long, uncomfortable, confusing silence, I will simply inform you that Vic Hermanson was being a numpty with his t-shirt on back to front. That's fancy British slang, don't you know?
All right, we have just had a conversation which is probably going to be left off the air, but I'm going...
That's 2 weeks in a row, Vic.
Man.
And yes, I'm at fault for both of them, but the topic at hand is the Icehouse. And the Icehouse is a very, very special place in my memory. I grew up in a little town in Louisiana called Converse, Louisiana. It's the inspiration for Mugwump, Louisiana. It was a very weird place. A lot of these little southern towns are very strange places. You've got some strange people there. You have a strange history. Converse, though you've never heard of it, at one time was a big economic center in Louisiana because it was a place where they had a railroad terminal. They were moving molasses and sugarcane and lithium ore and trees. It was a big economic center. And then sometime around 1940 or so, it started to fall apart because other transportation hubs came along. But one of the things they built in that town was an ammonia ice factory. If you needed ice back in the day, if you needed to keep something at least reasonably cool and fresh, you didn't have electric refrigerators to do that with. You had basically a big igloo, vertical igloo, insulated the best they could insulate it, which was with horsehair. And every day or every other day, you would get a big 50-pound chunk of ice that they would deliver to you. They'd put it at the top of the refrigerator, and it would keep your milk at least to the point where it wasn't going to make you sick. It would keep a steak fresh for a couple of days. So that's how people ate. Well, I grew up. There's a book called A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. If you haven't read A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, you should. It's a story about these kids growing up in Brooklyn very, very, very poor. I mean, they're really, really struggling just to have something to eat. They basically live on buying 2-day-old bread from the local bread factory. And the whole story, they're talking about all these problems they go through. Well, at the very end, the mother of this family marries a comparatively wealthy man. And so, of course, all the problems of being poor are going to go away. Since she has a new baby, and that baby's not going to have to worry about what to eat, about where they live, about being evicted, about anything along those lines. She's going to have an easy life. And the older kids are talking about, what was her name? Let's just say it was something like Mary Elizabeth, poor Mary Elizabeth. And one of them said, why do you say poor? Because she's not going to have any fun. She's not going to, so the lives of poor kids are not necessarily not fun. Right. You find ways to have fun in that world. And the ice house existed right next to the trailer that we lived in. We lived in a 42-foot trailer, thousands of which had been built for oil field workers. Basically, it was going to be, take one of those trailers, put it out next to the oil field, and you'll get 2 guys, and they'll live there, with their beer and their shotguns. Well, over time, those came down to families. So we had 4 people living in our trailer rather than just 2, necessitating that I slept on a shelf up in my sister's bedroom. But right next to that trailer was this old ammonia ice factory. And it was a pretty good-sized building. It was probably 80 feet wide and maybe 120 feet long, and it was several stories for the cranes that they used to move these huge vats of water. Okay? I'm talking a vat of water that's 10 feet long and 8 feet deep and 3 feet wide. Big, huge vats of water. And there were dozens of them in there. And at some time in the past, they had just decided, we're gone, we're leaving all this stuff. So they left the cranes, they left the vats, they left the big, huge hooks that they would use to wrangle these big chunks of ice. They left the offices upstairs.
So that's where the I Know What You Did Last Summer guy got the hooks from.
Of course, yeah, that is where he got the hooks.
Yeah.
That's where he got them. And then upstairs, they had left the offices with all these ledgers. And I'd been. This was when I was 6, and I'd been reading since I was 4, and so I'd go up there and I'd read these ledgers.
Wow.
And I'd try to figure out what the heck are they talking about. They'll say, 3 metric tons ammonia being delivered. And this kind of stuff. They left all the personnel files up there. And so...
Could you imagine that now?
Imagine that now. Well, of course, my mother and my father had said, Victor, you are not to play in that ice house.
So of course that's where you played.
That was what was supposed to go. And you were not to play in that ice house. Well, they had also told me that I wasn't to play in the old abandoned oil derrick or in the toxic waste field.
None of which you did, right?
And yes, I never played at any of these places.
Right.
And so the toxic waste field was I'm talking about how strange this little town was. People from LSU would come out there and dig it up, not because they were trying to find toxic waste, but because they were trying to find glyptodon shells. So a glyptodon is it looks like a turtle 12 feet long with a proportionally sized shell. And that part of Louisiana was one place where the glyptodons played. And many of them had died and in that area. So it wasn't uncommon for people to come out to dig up glyptodon shells.
An armadillo.
Yeah, it does look like an armadillo.
Even the tail, it's got like a little little armored tail.
Yeah, a little armored tail. So, in my mind, of course, because there were glyptodons there once, there probably still were glyptodons. They just were hiding better. Mm-hmm. Maybe they were hiding in the ice house. I don't know. But the ice house was a place where bums would occasionally come and sleep. The entire front of it was windows, and of course, they had all been broken. Mm-hmm. And to get into the ice house, it was a simple matter of a 6-year-old kid climbing up the rubble and going through the broken windows. Mm-hmm. And then kind of trying to traverse the ice house so that you didn't fall into the vats full of water. Well, the vats full of water had snakes in them. They had fish in them.
No kidding.
They had nutrias in them.
Nutrias.
Big, huge, stinking rat things were in them. And they would kind of hear you, and they kind of peek up out of there. They'd hide. And the feel in the place was, man, it was full Stephen King. I mean, had I had more talent, I could have written all kinds of scary stories about the ice house.
Now, made with ammonia.
Yes, ammonia absorption.
That would have been, were they making dry ice?
No, they were just making water ice.
Huh.
They're using ammonia to generate the cold.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I'm using ammonia to generate the cold.
Yep.
And go ahead.
What did you have scary stuff happen there?
You know, I really wish that I had. You know, I wish that I had seen some ghosts. I wish that I had seen, you know, some kind of hulking, shaggy, horrible thing that lived in the corner and had once been human. You know, I wish that there had been some horrible, scary things happening there. But no, none of that ever happened.
You've lived by all of these really cool places, because not only did you play in this cool ice house and a toxic waste dump and oil derelicts and all that, but you used to play around inside Trans-Allegheny. Was it not Trans-Allegheny? Shoot, I'm getting the name
wrong.
State. Wrong state. That's.
I've never lived any place as cool as where the ice house was. I mean, that was the coolest thing.
No, you lived down the. You told me you lived down the street from this place, tuberculosis clinic.
Waverly Hills.
Waverly Hills. God, why can't
Waverly Hills? When we were talking about Boy Scouts a few minutes ago, I was on the Eagle Path. Okay, I didn't make it. We moved to Tampa, and I never could become involved with the troop again. That felt the same to me.
Right.
All that magic went away.
Yeah, and it's a lot about your well, it's partially the leaders and it's partially your friends in the troop. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't that I couldn't do the work, it's just that there was no fun in it anymore. But my Eagle Scout project was building a bridge over one of the creeks on the Waverly Hills grounds. Because look, I've been in Waverly Hills. I snuck in Waverly Hills just like I snuck in the ice house.
Yeah.
And once again, I didn't see any ghosts. I didn't get any taps on the shoulder. I didn't hear any "get out," anything like that.
No doors slam.
No doors
no
slamming. No shadows going across windows. just a spooky.
Did you ever go in there at night?
Yes.
Okay. Well, now that's an interesting topic.
That's when it was easiest to get in there. Okay, because you had security guards who really didn't want you in there during the day. At night, they went somewhere else. Left one guy for a very large place.
So that's an interesting topic. You go in this place at night multiple times. Nothing happens.
Let's say 3 times.
Oh, well, that's multiple.
Okay. Yeah.
More than one. Uh-huh. Nothing happens, and yet anybody who goes in there anybody I've talked to who has gone to Waverly Hills has not been disappointed. There has been activity of some sort there. Shadows, noises, door slams, touched, whatever it is, and obviously stuff on equipment, but even just personal experience. There's a lot of personal experiences people have at Waverly Hills, especially with shadow figures. So why the change? Is it you? Are you a black hole for paranormal experience? We know that's not true because you get EVPs on your recordings. So it's not that they won't interact with you at all.
All kinds of woods around Waverly Hills.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and we had found places where there were old trails that opened up into clearings where people have been camping, say, in the 1800s. And so we'd go out there and clean up the trail and clean up the place where we could. There were streams, clean streams. Okay, we could even have water out there. Plus, the water at the hospital was still running.
Oh, really?
Wow. So we're out there camping, just like Boy Scouts do. And of course, at night we're mainly talking about girls. That's what you're talking about. Trying to figure out about girls, and a few other things. Chess. You're getting the picture that you're two extreme nerds.
I was going to say, once you start veering into chess on a camping trip, you are definitely in nerd territory.
You're definitely in nerd territory.
Been there, but yes, I get that.
And so at some point, you kind of figure out that, hey, I don't have a lot to say about girls, and I'm kind of bored talking about chess. Let's go up to the hospital and see what we can find.
Yeah.
Okay, so we do. Now, we don't have any expectations of what we're going to find in the hospital other than, man, it's got to be spooky and cool. There's got to be all kinds of weird stuff in there. Let's go see that stuff. So we had no expectation that we were going to see anything other than spooky and cool. And boy, it was spooky and cool.
Oh, I'm sure it was.
Yeah. It was spooky. It was spooky and cool. But once we're in with our here's the other thing. We had flashlights. Mm-hmm. And we'd use the flashlights real quick, real furtively, because you don't want the security guard to see that you've got flashlights.
Right.
Okay. So your eyes acclimatize, and within a few minutes you can see pretty well. But it was just spooky and cool. There were no ghosts. There were no shadow figures. There were no disembodied voices. There were no, big shaggy horrible things crawling around in the corner. Gosh, I wish there were.
Hello.
This is the fascinating thing about haunted tourism.
Yeah.
All right. How much of the haunted tourism is generated by the actual act of investigating?
I think most of it.
How much of it is, because I've seen this happen, how much of this is something following the people who are doing the investigating versus tied to the site itself? That does happen.
Or how much is someone willing something to happen or willing themselves to see something?
Let me give you another possibility that just popped in my mind. What if they're like dogs? Where I just got a new dog, and this is making sure Stewie's not where you can hear me. This is the best dog I've ever had. Okay.
Boy, Stewie's going to be real upset at you. I'm going to tell him.
In terms of all that dog stuff, like running up to you and
right,
being real happy to see you and rolling over and want you to pet his belly and hopping up in bed with you and acting like, this is the best place I could possibly be. Okay, so Max has already figured out everything that he can do to please me. And it's really deep in his mind that he wants to please me. What if these entities, remember I've always talked about the paranormal zoo, what if at least some of these entities are essentially the equivalent of paranormal dogs? Mm-hmm. And they're following you around, and you go to investigate somewhere, And they follow along, and they say, oh, boy, we're here at the spooky place. Nothing makes him happier than when there's some kind of sound that comes over that box that he carries. So let's make that happen. Man.
What a great theory. I like that.
So these are paranormal dogs who have nothing better to do in their existence except make Dave happy.
Yeah.
And they do.
Paranormal pets.
And then every once in a while they say, they really get, more people come around when something happens that's a little bit scary. So let's do something a little bit scary. I mean, you almost never hear on these paranormal investigations of anything really bad happening to the people who go there.
It's not frequent, but it's usually associated with specific locations.
Specific locations, okay, but it's not something that happens very much. The bad thing that happened to you was not something you were looking for.
Well, and it wasn't even related to any investigating.
Right, yeah, it was not something you were looking for. It was just something that happened to you in the normal sequence of life. Okay, so I can just see these critters, part of the paranormal zoo, I don't know what they are, saying, oh boy, we're at a place where I can, wag my tail and get a dog treat.
Well, let's kick that on a little bit further, though. I think Vic he's onto something. All right, so these entities, they're kind of like Max, the dog, and they want to please their owners. All right, well, let's flip that over to the coin of the demonic or quote unquote infernal entities out there. They know that you want to see things. They know that you want to hear things. They want to draw you in, so to speak. Well, if we pay attention to that, well, what is the very very explanation of the term obsession?
Right.
Think about that for a moment. You're becoming obsessed because they know you. They're giving you this sign. They're giving you what you really want to see. They're giving you some excitement. They're giving you something other than your normal mundane life, so to speak. And so once they draw you in, you are more susceptible to the oppression once you've been obsessed with that. When someone becomes, Dave, I'm sure you've seen it, people that are obsessed into this paranormal
I've never seen
lifestyle.
Anybody like that, Father Mike.
I know, but
certainly because I've had all the mirrors in my house removed. I've never seen that before.
But does that make sense? I think Vic just gave a good analogy of that.
Let me go back to the Ice House for a second.
Yeah.
Okay. The Ice House was a very dangerous place. My parents were very correct in telling me I shouldn't go in there.
I'm sure with all the bats and stuff, yeah.
They should have come over there, grabbed me by the arm, yanked me out of there, and whipped my butt.
Yeah.
Whipped the absolute snot out of me for a long time. Okay, that was the appropriate response. So as long as you were up in the old mezzanine, or as long as you were, walking around the edges, you were okay.
Disclaimer right quick. Disclaimer, Vic does not uphold the belief that every person should perform child abuse on their child. That is not what he is saying.
No.
He's talking about discipline.
Just me, and that would not have been child abuse. That would have been.
I know.
There's child abuse, and then there's parenting.
Exactly.
Okay? The line is much earlier than it used to be, but there is still a line.
Okay, but these vats were arranged in a grid. Okay, now I'm saying they were about 10 feet long. They were about 8 feet deep, and they were about 2 or 2.5 feet wide, okay, with about a 6-inch area between them, maybe 8 inches. And the 8 inches was where all the ammonia tubing went, okay?
Which has long been removed because it was probably copper.
Probably so. Yes, that's where all the ammonia tubing. Well, the place is gone. Okay, it's not there anymore.
So that's
Yeah,
how
but
the
I mean, it
Clinton-
was probably empty then because copper is one of the first things to go because it gets
exactly. So that's how the Clintons got rid of all the bodies, right?
Well,
wrong
I mean,
podcast
gosh.
for that photo.
Oh, I'm sorry. Wrong podcast.
We,
Okay.
we only had so many vats. I mean, we could be challenged.
I couldn't help it, guys. I'm sorry.
All right, but anyway, so of course, my sister and I decided that the best thing to do was to tightrope walk along the parts of the structure where the ammonia tubes had gone.
Are you
Makes sense to
serious?
me.
You know, what's that?
Are you? You mean?
Oh, yes, I'm
tightrope,
very
like.
Well, I mean,
Rope.
it was.
I
Well,
can't get
no.
my-
I don't. There was no
Tightrope.
rope there.
Okay.
I'm just saying it was like, oh, let's pretend this is a tightrope.
Okay.
and let's
walk the edge.
walk the edge. Just walk along these. Now, look, we were young and agile and all that, so I never fell in. But if the
But he hasn't seen his sister since.
if the paranormal, yeah, my sister's, if the paranormal preternatural world, see, because they had even done things like there were old leftover pieces of wood that they had put on there because it was easier for them to bounce over those pieces of wood, and we'd walk across those. Okay, look, we lived half an inch in balance away from falling into those things.
Oh, yeah.
All the time. Okay. If my sister had fallen in, I couldn't have gotten her out. And the water wasn't right there at the surface. The water was a couple of feet down. So could she have pulled herself up out of this thing? Probably not. Okay, so if the paranormal world had mean dogs, not pleasing dogs, and they had any way of influencing the world, just a tiny little push, tiny little nudge, push his foot that way, push his shoulder that way. Kid in the vet.
But I don't think it works like that. So I believe that if we're talking something negative, something demonic, I think most children are off limits, right? They're out of bounds. It is
Really?
not until later in life, once you're past the age of reason and you start being responsible for your sin, that you are opening yourself up to some type of demonic oppression or obsession. So I think you would have to be, otherwise they'd just be knocking people off all the time. And I don't think that God allows that.
Well, I have such vivid visual memories of that ice house. And clerestory windows at the very top, sunlight coming through all the moss, and occasionally seeing a water moccasin in one of these vats, and rattlesnakes and nutrients, and that smell. Of course, it's been raining in the windows for a long time, so everything had become moldy. So I'm glad that God protects silly, stupid children.
Oh, I think that kids make stupid choices that end their lives. I mean, it happens, but
we had no business coming out of there alive.
I totally would have played there. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, I would have too. I mean, we had a blast.
Well, let me take this a little further with this idea, or this really a question about it. About
the paranormal dogs, or
about the. So I think that the paranormal dogs, something that is just out to entertain
make you happy,
you to just be companion to you or whatever. I think that's very possible. I think that we have stuff follow us at home from investigations. I've seen it. I've had it happen to me. There's been nothing negative about it. Well, once, but most of the time it's just, harmless. But this idea that something negative could want to draw you in that Father Mike is talking about. So something demonic will say, and it is trying to, you're going through obsession and maybe into oppression. My question is, how good is the demonic at playing the long game?
Oh,
because
yeah.
I hear lots of times in podcasts with exorcists, which is why it's great to have our own as part of the team. But I hear in podcasts from exorcists that they almost can't control themselves. They blurt out. They have to show their power. They have to, be arrogant and whatever. How long could they really play the long game until they play their hand?
I don't know. Let's look at Lucifer. Let's go back to the beginning. I will set myself higher above than God.
Mm-hmm.
And then Lucifer says to Eve, did God really say? He was playing upon Eve's, number one, emotions and human willfulness and curiosity. And that's kind of basically what we're talking about right now. But he also plays and creates a atmosphere of desire for Adam and Eve.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the deceit really came to fruition. This attitude of desire, this attitude of innocently going into disobedience and not realize that's what you're doing, but it's so much of a desire that it takes over you.
But that's a form of obsession right there.
Exactly.
That is
and
really.
So, and that's and you're exactly right. That's what's taking place from the very beginning. Did God really say that you would die?
But this is not a situation where, the serpent worked on Eve for 10 years to get Eve to build up the courage to bite the apple, right? What I'm saying is if I go and investigate Mansfield,
Mm-hmm.
right, and something attaches to me, and now everywhere I go, it's building this desire in me to be more and more involved in the paranormal.
The enemy is going to take this little seed of desire that you have, and he's going to expound upon it. He's going to build upon it. You love the paranormal.
Mm-hmm.
That's your gig, man. You like it. You like it. However, think about it this way as well in the situation that we're talking about right now. The enemy has already proved to you once before that he knew that's what you liked.
Sure.
And so look at it from that point of view. We all have things that we enjoy. We all have things that we like, but maybe sometimes we need to really be careful to not let it overtake us, so to speak.
Well, I agree.
I would have been with Vic. If the vat was empty, I probably would have been in it and say, "Hey, let's fill it full of water and use it like a swimming pool." I mean, hey, well, he said water was free at the hospital. Let's pipe it over there. I mean, but
that'd be a pretty long piping.
Yeah, it would. But am I making any sense from a desire point?
Oh, sure. Anything that's out there in the paranormal zoo that's trying to find some kind of advantage over you is going to use the things you love against you.
Yeah, I mean, that could be a desire in the paranormal. It could be a desire in
I think
drugs. It could be anything.
Right.
Anything that you love can be taken too far.
Right. It could pervert even a normal, natural thing like love for your children or something like that.
Or love of comic books. The next thing you know, you have gone bankrupt because you have bought the perfect editions of your favorites. Right.
Hello.
I do believe these things are quite clever and quite malicious, and more than willing to hurt you through any means that they can.
One of the questions that I've always been asked, and in 30 years plus of ministry, I'm at a point where I can be real honest and say, I don't have a clue. Where in the point does the crossing ground come into effect?
What do you mean?
I'm not quite sure what you mean. Can you?
To that point of no return.
Okay, when do you reach a point
of that giving into? You have reached the point to where this thing has helped you achieve all your desires. You with me?
Yeah.
And then, okay, something's about to happen. I've always wanted to try to figure that out. I've given in. I've had, this thing is just playing with my desires. It's playing with my emotion. It's called me enough as Reagan to fulfill the void that her mother left in her life, and because of her seek to fame and fortune, and then all of a sudden Captain Howdy slaps the shit out of me. Talking about that.
And that was kind of my point, right?
Yeah.
How patient can these things be?
Obviously pretty doggone.
It is hard to imagine that you could be in a situation where there's a buildup of obsession over 10 years until it starts wreaking havoc in your life. Do you see people that have been oppressed or obsessed for that long before it really starts causing problems for them?
Well, for me and for, all the cases that I've had, I've never been involved in any case whatsoever, even those in present now, that if caught earlier, they wouldn't be going through what they're going through right now. And see, that's how it hides. This thing sneaks in, and it hides to where the person doesn't even realize what's going on. Mm-hmm. We have a common individual that we've both spoken to, and there's nothing confidential, but I'll never mention names, but they dealt with this thing for so long and not even realizing that that's what they were dealing with until it got beyond a certain point. And that's the same thing with every case that I've ever dealt with. It's never even really caught until it reaches a certain point. Until then, finally, something has to.
Yeah, I mean, when it breaks loose, it breaks loose hard.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
It's just a question of how long has this been smoldering? Is this something that is, a year, 2 years, or, in that case, we're talking potentially 30 years,
50 or longer,
at least 30 or 40 years. Yeah. And that's hard to imagine that it can be that patient. So
I agree.
All right. What do you guys think? Another list?
Well,
I think another list is a good idea.
Well,
Father Mike has a remnant he wants to talk about.
There was one on the present list that I don't know. It may be a bummer. I don't want to get it. I don't want to.
Tell me which one. Tell me which one it was.
Well, it was the.
Here's the list again.
It was the bogus social workers.
That is a very interesting thing.
When I heard that, the first thing that came to my mind was sex trafficking children.
Very much. Yeah, very much. Let me just talk quickly about what it was. Phantom social workers. If you type in phantom social workers in any kind of search engine, most of the things that come up will simply say, it never happened. It was, this was just panic. The rumors spread and this never happened.
And Epstein wasn't murdered.
I don't believe this. I believe there probably was some aspect of that in there, but families would have in England, not wealthy families, we're talking council housing families, would have someone come to their door. Hello, Mrs. Birdsong. I'm from the local Child Protective Services. We need to make sure that everything is proper in your... everything is proper in your household. And the concern was that these social workers were coming there for the purpose of kidnapping their kids, of taking their kids. I don't know if any kids were ever actually taken, but I know it was a real huge panic in London for a number of years. Had you ever heard about this before?
I have not, but it makes total sense to me because the DFACS is one of the most corrupt agencies that we have in our country right now. And
which agency are you talking about?
DFACS, the Department of Family and Children Services.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And the head person over this service in our country, I don't know about now since we've had a new election and Trump is involved, but before the latest election, the head person was a Wiccan witch. And she was exposed. Kidding. Oh, yeah. She was a Wiccan witch and was greatly involved in removing children from their home. And I don't know if Vic heard any. Vic, were you able to hear any of this? No, he did have his. I'm going to wait. Now that he's back, I'm going to restate what I just said. Vic, anarchist cook. I used to have that, by the way, as a teenager.
Yeah, this is the original first.
Mine was black.
No, this is not the first printing. This is the second. The first printing was just like paper that was bound by staples or something.
Yeah.
But
you guys really want to get us into rough territory here.
That's actually some great information in there. If you
there really is.
But back to what I was saying, even today, and I would love to see how Elizabeth would deal with this, Vic. But even today, the head person over the Department of Family and Children Services, as I was saying, is a Wiccan witch.
Yay.
And she has been exposed many times of removing young children from their home for God knows for what purposes. And so when the topic phantom social worker came up, that's one of the first things that came to my mind, is because we have a lot of important people, a lot of VIPs involved in snatching young children for sex trafficking under the disguise of protecting. And I think that's where you were kind of going with that, wasn't you, Vic?
Well, I don't know, but I don't know. It was sex trafficking. I don't know if it was. I don't know what it was.
I mean, but it had the potential to be.
One goes there because what else can a child provide?
Or some kind of other slavery, but
yeah, I mean, but you don't really think of physical labor. You think of very very negative things. Very, very negative things. And I'm not a believer in the absolute goodness of government.
Really?
I would love to hear Elizabeth's version of justice in your next book.
Her version of justice.
Yeah, on this case.
Oh, I'm sure Elizabeth could really do in some child traffickers.
Yes, she could.
Oh, yeah, she could.
I bet she could.
She could.
Hey, you need to turn that into a comic.
Well, the last big chapter I wrote about Elizabeth was her speculating about what could actually kill her. How could you kill Elizabeth?
You know, Vic,
Yeah.
Father Mike just nailed it.
Yeah, how's that?
You need to turn Elizabeth into a comic book.
Mm-hmm. I told you, man.
You need a good graphic artist. That would
Jessica
make
Birdsong.
a phenomenal
Vampiric Warrior.
comic.
Jessica Bird. Have y'all looked? Have y'all been following Jessica in all her art?
No, I have not.
She used
Josh.
to draw a lot of like
Oh, man.
the old school Japanese style
Phenomenal.
manga stuff, and now she's getting into watercolors and all. She does good work.
She could take a screenshot of you right now, Dave, and use watercolors and make you look even better.
Well, that wouldn't be too hard.
I mean,
No.
no, I'm just saying that's how good she is. She is phenomenal.
You showed us some of her artwork back when we interviewed her last season. I think
I
you sent
probably
us
did.
something that was really
Probably
good.
did.
But no, I think that's a phenomenal idea.
Yeah, she needs to
Vic.
be a comic.
That would make a great comic.
Elizabeth make a good comic.
Elizabeth, I mean,
Your first show would have, man, that would take up probably 16 issues.
yeah, no,
From the
absolutely.
beginning.
Yeah.
No,
That's the
seriously.
thing. Just
Seriously.
the
just the first show.
the origin story of Elizabeth would be
Not to mention the second
an
and third
entire season of comics.
Yeah.
It'd be like
Are we
12
talking
issues.
the Kaplan origin?
Yeah.
Are we talking
the Kaplan origin?
the Nebuchad symbiont origin?
Well,
You got to save that
Kaplan
one
came
for a
first.
later version, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, she was lying to Kaplan. That's what I decided.
right.
And now after 1, 2, 3 full seasons, that's 3 years you got already worth of comics. Easy, if not more. And now we come into season number 4, Elizabeth's Justice,
Ooh, I like
where
that.
she
Yeah.
takes
I like
on the cause for the lives of the innocent. Because she once was innocent and her innocence was stolen. And she says, not on my watch.
Not on my watch.
Batman ain't got shit on me.
After being around for 1,000 years, she's got to do something. All right. We're going to do another topic.
Yes.
I hope. And I have a good listening of topics. And everybody is going to get it in their mind that all we talk about is this topic.
Oh, my.
And for one topic, that's all we got to do. One topic. Dave's giving me the look like, yeah.
I'm waiting to see what's coming.
That's a fearful.
Okay.
I see my
Topic
ball
one.
in me.
Topic 1. Change your underwear twice a week.
Oh, God.
which is the title of a book about old 50s film strip films.
Okay.
Father Mike remembers them. You remember? Look, sometimes you'd go to class, and there would be a film projector
Right?
set up in the middle row, and whether you admit it or not, you went yes.
Or in the gymnasium. Yeah.
Or in the gymnasium, yes, because I don't have to do anything today except sit and listen to this silly film. I don't have to come up with anything good.
Next
number
week,
2.
less than 2,748 topics.
The next one is moon landing denial.
Fresh top of mind topic there. It's good.
Fresh top of mind topic, which came up randomly. Third is Jack Chick tracts, which I love. Okay, I'm a genuine fan of Jack Chick tracts. Topic 4. Can heads remain cognizant and aware after decapitation?
Yep, brain in a bat.
Yeah.
Topic 5. Well, only for a few seconds, but topic 5. Hidden books, hidden movies, etc. Perhaps like The Man in the High Tower. If you guys remember that one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I remember the series. Didn't read the book, but hidden books. So just real quick, elaborate on that just a little bit.
Well, it's an idea I've had for a long time of, let's say there are out there books that were written, and for some reason the powers that be decided that book needed to disappear.
Got it.
Okay? Or movies. The powers that be decided that movie needed to disappear. Okay, then that's cool too. Topic 6. Tears in reality or glitches in the Matrix.
Oh, I like that one.
I do too.
All right. Take it away.
Well, I always go back to music. And I think that's what makes Dave and I drawn together sometimes. But whenever I think about life, and especially when we talk about any kind of subject like the Matrix, I'm always reminded of Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin. And one of Plant's lyrics was, yes, there are 2 paths you can go by, but in the long run, there's still time to change the road you're on.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always reminded of that. Okay, you want the, correct me, you want the green pill or the blue pill, or the red pill or the
red
blue
pill or the blue pill, right?
Red pill or the blue pill. And I'm like, you know what? Does it really matter in the end?
Yes.
And I believe that. So Plant in his infinite wisdom says, yes, there are 2 paths you can go by, but there's still time to change the road you're on.
Right. Unlike the red pill or blue pill, because once you take that red pill, you're done. You're going to wake up.
Exactly. So I hear a lot of truth in both sides of that coin.
Okay.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, the glitch in the Matrix idea is interesting because there's things we see, there's things we experience that just don't make sense. And you can take that back to the breakdown we did, right?
Yeah.
Of Thomas Campbell.
Yeah.
Right.
True.
It's this idea that is the, and I termed it as the operating system, right? But that is the system of consciousness throwing out clues or hints that, hey, there's more than what you see. There's more here. There's something you don't understand. I'm not going to tell you what it is. I'm not going to give you enough information to know what it is. But this is an indication that life is not just what you see, hear, and feel, what you can understand. And now, whether that's because we just aren't experienced or educated enough in it to understand it, or whether that's the whole purpose is to not be able to understand it. Maybe the purpose of these things is so that we'll have a mystery that is unsolvable. Maybe that's what Bigfoot is.
True.
Right? Maybe Bigfoot is the unsolvable mystery.
And what would be the purpose of an unsolvable mystery?
Well, Vic, what we were talking about, you had to run away real quickly. I brought up a lot of times when I think about certain subjects, I think about music. And while we're on this subject, I always think about the gospel according to Led Zeppelin.
Okay. Yeah.
In the chapter of Stairway to Heaven, where Plant states, yes, there are two paths you can go by, but in the long run, there's still time to change the road you're on.
Okay.
And we are comparing that with the red pill and the blue pill right now. But
you take the red pill, you stay in the real world.
No, the red pill wakes you up.
The red pill wakes you up. The blue pill keeps you in the matrix.
Right. Yeah. So you take the red pill, you're there with Morpheus in the Nebuchadnezzar.
Right.
Right.
Getting ice picks stuck in your brain.
Blue pill, you go on eating steak and doing your
going
drab
steak
job and
going to your drab job every day.
Red pill, you wake up and have a lobotomy.
Yeah, really.
Exactly. Yeah, so I guess the idea that you can have one or the other, and what I'm suggesting here is that maybe you can't have the red pill.
Okay.
I think you can because of
you know that the red pill exists,
right?
But the
you
barrier
can't really have it.
Well, see, the barrier in the matrix is always leaky. Okay.
I would call the blue pill denial, though.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so has anybody here, Dave, Father Mike, Josh, Victor, have you ever had something that didn't seem to comport with the physical causality? Didn't comport with just the world as we know it? Where something happened that didn't make any sense at all. I've had one thing happen.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us about yours.
It's when my sister was sitting on the toilet and I was trying to make the nickel disappear.
Yep.
Okay. Where I'm holding the nickel in my hand and concentrating as hard as I can to make this nickel disappear. And my sister is A, ticked off that I'm in the bathroom with her when she's using the bathroom. B,
you really need to change this story.
I was
to be
wondering,
at the kitchen table.
where the hell is he going? I mean, why is he in the toilet with a nickel and trying to make it disappear?
It's just kids. I get it.
Yeah.
and B, really tired of me trying to make this nickel disappear.
Yeah.
Okay. But even she was aware that, dang, he made the nickel disappear. Well, I'm pretty sure she really still wanted me to leave, but it got her attention. Okay, so that to me was something that...
Oh, yeah, did not fit within the...
Did not fit within where we are right
reality now. Context in which we live.
Right. Now, so go up on YouTube right now and say glitch in the matrix, and you'll see a lot of stuff that's not very glitchy at all. Okay, you'll see a plane coming into land at LAX with a 60-mile-an-hour headwind. And it doesn't look like that plane is moving very fast.
Mm-hmm.
That plane is just kind of sitting up there as it's coming into land. And, of course, they never show you the full 20 minutes it takes for it to land. But that's not a glitch. That's mildly interesting. I'm trying to think of anything beyond my disappearing nickel that it was actually a glitch.
What about those moments of deja vu where you feel like you've done something that day before, but
those can be really powerful.
Yeah.
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 I mean, I've even had deja vu, where, I'm experiencing deja vu, and then I'm thinking, oh, I've experienced this exact deja vu before.
Yep.
That always kind of sets me back for a moment, like, what's going on here? Yeah.
It's like your brain's trying to buffer and catch up.
Well, I've had conversations happen that I seem to have gone through in a dream or something. Mm-hmm. All these are really, really hard to document. I mean,
I think the closest thing that comes to mind is I was coming out of the attic once and stepping down on a ladder. And 1 minute, the ladder was there, and the next minute, it wasn't. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean the ladder physically disappeared. I mean the ladder was knocked out from under me. There was no point at which I was like wobbly on the ladder. The ladder started tipping. All I know is 1 minute, I put my foot on the ladder, and the next minute I'm falling. And should have died because there was a step underneath me that I should have hit my head on, and somehow I didn't. Broke my heel, but that was unusual.
Okay, so what do you think happened there?
Well, that was towards the tail end of me going through all the oppression.
Okay.
And so I'm pretty sure it was knocked out from underneath me. Mm-hmm. But what went through my mind was, I'm falling. Oh, crap, I'm going to hit my head because there's a concrete step there. And then pain. And then me sitting up going, how the hell did I not hit my head? And ow, my heel really hurts.
Yeah,
my heel really hurts.
But it wasn't until later, it may have even been the next morning, where I looked at my wife and I said, I don't know how that happened. It was like I went to step and the ladder wasn't there. I don't remember any wobbling, and I did not hit my head, so it's not like I had a knot on my head.
And you didn't hear the ladder falling on the concrete floor.
Nope.
Nor did you. Where was the ladder once you hit?
That's
the ground?
what I was going to ask.
It fell over.
It fell over. Okay.
But by the time it probably got knocked as I was stepping, and then I'm falling, and I'm much more worried about hitting the floor than I am hearing the ladder fall.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think it was just knocked out from under me, and then I fell. But
this is what happened to Malachi Martin.
What happened to him?
Had a ladder disappear from underneath him.
No kidding.
That's what I've heard.
Well,
that was what ultimately led to his death. Was the injuries incurred when that ladder fell from underneath him.
That's really interesting.
Look that up, Josh. I think it was a traumatic brain injury from him hitting his head.
Mm-hmm. He also took on I think he did. He conducted one more exorcism before he died too, I believe.
Well, conducting an exorcism with a traumatic brain injury is not.
That's not recommended practice.
No. But it shows you the commitment thereof. So, I mean, it's very commendable, but not wise.
Intracerebral hemorrhagic stroke.
Okay. All right. I can see that too. From a blood clot from the smack.
Falling in his apartment.
Have you guys ever listened to the Hostage to the Devil podcast?
I have not listened to the podcast, no.
Okay, so you've seen the movie.
I have not. I didn't even know there was a movie.
The documentary.
It's a documentary.
What I have is the audio book.
I believe they eventually removed it from
I have it on YouTube.
Netflix, but it's on YouTube.
Josh, you got that?
Yeah, I
I'll watch it
a
tonight.
while back.
Okay.
And so I enjoyed it. The guy who did the documentary is from Ireland, and he created a podcast that was first an audio podcast. Now it's a video. It's on YouTube as well. So you can get the audio version of it on Apple, but for some reason it won't work on my phone. I can't get that one or The Wandering Road to play on my iPhone. I have no idea why. Every now and then I'll restart my phone and it'll work for like one episode and then it stops. It loads it, and then every time you hit play, it stops.
Well, let me ask you the all famous IT question, which really pisses me off sometimes. Have you uninstalled it and installed the app back?
Yeah, well, it's part of the OS. It's Apple Podcasts.
Right, Apple, you can't uninstall the
Apple.
I love Apple, but this is one thing that I don't get. And so anyway, but yeah, he's got a decent podcast where he goes through some interviews that didn't make the cut for the documentary, and then further information about Martin. Now, in the movie, he never really makes a judgment on Martin.
I didn't like the movie.
And
we need to watch it sometimes along with
in the podcast, about a couple episodes in, he finally makes a stand and goes, after all the people I've talked to, after everything I've listened, I believe that Malachi Martin was exactly who he said he is. Mm-hmm. That maybe he was, a little embellishing, little showman or whatever, but the core of what he said, he believes. And that was interesting. And I think that was one of the problems. And he said this, people have told him this. He never should have made the documentary without having formed an opinion on Martin.
Yeah.
He should have formed an opinion and then built it off of that.
Well, and you know what? Someone asked me one time why I do what I do and why I'm training Josh to basically let me back off. I want somebody to be able to say the same thing about me one day. That I was a person that stood and said, not today, not on my watch. I don't want fame. I don't want glory. I don't want this. I want someone to say, you know what, that guy, bless his dumbass heart, he really cared.
I tell you what, Father Mike, for the right price, I will say anything you want. And listen, this is my Zelle account. Hang on.
I love it. I love it.
So as Vic was saying, the Malachi Martin had the ladder knocked out from under him. Well, one of the cases we worked on, they had a ladder knocked out from under them.
Yeah.
And they wound up hanging from a gutter.
True.
And having to work their way down the house. Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. That's 3 cases, one personal, of maybe we should not get on ladders.
well, it's kind of funny because the stairway that Josh and I went up was kind of like one of those old-fashioned fold-up ladders, but it was more at an angle. It was more at an angle like a stairwell, and
it was pulled down.
No, it wasn't pulled down, but I'm just making the same kind of reference because that's where I got the what slapped out of me.
Mm-hmm. Were you on the steps when it happened?
Oh yeah, going up them.
Okay, interesting.
And I'm like, if it would have hit me just a little bit harder, I believe Josh would have been catching me. And then he and I both would have been rolling back down.
Yeah.
I can think of one other time.
That would have been a bad day.
when I had something happen that seemed like a glitch in the Matrix. I don't like that term, but that's the term that is.
Yeah.
common these days. Because as I've said, I don't believe we're in a matrix. I don't believe we're in a simulation. This is the real world. And as difficult and as painful as it may be, this is the real world.
We're discussing the unknown.
Vic?
It's the paranormal. I mean, seriously, we're talking about the unknown. We're talking about the paranormal. So, say matrix.
It had snowed in Charlotte. It doesn't snow in Charlotte very often.
Really?
A little more often than it does in Thomaston, Georgia, but you don't get much snow in Charlotte. And so my older son was driving. I was sitting in the driver's seat. We were driving my wife's car, which was an Australian-built Mitsubishi Diamante. Nice car. And we're coming to an intersection, and the car approaching the street we were on skidded and passed up the place where it should have stopped by 2, 3, 4 feet, where we were in the direct path of hitting it. And my son, didn't have the driving skill to carefully maneuver around it yet, and there was somebody to the left of us, so we couldn't maneuver that way. And so I'm sitting there bracing for impact, that we're going to hit this car, and it's going to transfer its force basically into my chest. That's going to be great. And
yeah,
and we didn't hit. I mean, we just passed right through it. Or at least that was what everything in my mind said happened. Now, of course, the skeptics will say, well, you don't have very good depth perception. You can't judge angles in real time very well at all. That's just not a human ability. And
yet we do it every day when passing through intersections at stoplights.
Every day. Mm-hmm. I've spent, at that point, maybe 35 years driving without ever having an accident.
Yeah.
And so I think I have a pretty good ability to say when something's going to be a problem and when it's not going to be a problem.
And that's when Carrie Underwood starts singing, Jesus Take the Wheel.
Jesus Take the Wheel.
Yeah.
Well, somebody took the wheel.
Hello.
But it seemed as if those two cars occupied the same space at the same time.
Yeah.
Now, I have no way of confirming that. There's no evidence. There were no overhead cameras. But it certainly did seem like something that wasn't normal.
Well, you can't discount divine intervention. And
Nope.
I believe that's what it all comes down to right there is something paranormal. Even if it's, the quote unquote Christian world would never want to say the word paranormal and divine intervention all at the same breath.
Well, they can use
but
the word
it's
supernatural.
unknown. Divine intervention. It's supernatural. It's something that we don't understand.
Right.
We don't know. So don't treat it like an ugly word. Ugly word. I just sound like a Southern old grandma, didn't I? But
I do when I'm talking about the acts and interventions of God. I use the word supernatural.
yeah, and that's what it was. Divine.
Mm-hmm.
It was by divine intervention that you were not dead at that moment.
Vic, how long ago was this?
12 years.
12 years. It's a long time. So if this were a movie, about right now, this is when you'd be figuring out that 12 years ago you died.
Yeah.
And Father Mike and I have been helping you deal with moving on.
Look, I honestly...
Do you see dead people?
No, I don't.
I see.
But I have had thoughts like that in my head many, many times. Yeah, because I've had a dozen points in my life where I easily could have died.
Oh, yeah.
I've had a few.
If things were an inch to the left or an inch to the right, that kind of thing. My For instance, shooting rats in Florida for fun. My brother deciding that, there's a piece of metal out there right in front of Victor. Let's shoot at that piece of metal. See what happens. Bang, pow.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about a piece of lead going by my ear at a quarter of an inch or something.
If he'd have been filming it, you could have made a lot of money on YouTube.
Man, I remember
those videos
days,
get lots of views. A hole in the hat.
I remember the days when we were very foolish as kids. If you want to talk about something supernatural and divine intervention, we were some ignorant kids. I remember the days we would take our Dave. You remember the old-fashioned Powerline 880s? One of the first pump-up BB/pellet guns. Pump it up about 10 times, and then
I have a Crossman.
Yeah. Okay. So then we would shoot. We would get our 12 gauge cartridges, shells, and line them up across the backyard and lay down and shoot them. Oh, how stupid could we be?
You're trying to shoot the primer?
Yes, and that's what we did. We'd set them off. Yeah,
okay.
We were crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
And then we'd be running through the woods, having our BB wars, shooting each other.
I do remember those.
But the worst you're going to do there is damage an eye or something.
Yeah, I know. But we did it, buddy.
Shooting a shotgun shell primer. I mean, there's nothing to hold the explosion in. But still, I bet you some of those pellets would come out pretty fast.
Oh yeah,
they did.
Oh, yeah. So you were successful.
Oh, we were successful, but I mean, thank God it was. I hate to use the phrase "just birdshot," but
did you ever get hit by them?
No. Thank God.
I mean, in theory, it should go the other direction. If you
it should make a cone going away from you.
Yeah,
is what it should make.
But it could have twisted, and one guy decided he was one day going to shoot a 22 cartridge, and he just stuck it in the ground and put his gun right on top of it and shot it. And it had so much blowback, it went up into his BB gun rifle barrel and split it.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
So he was that close to it.
Yeah. He just put it point blank.
People don't realize how powerful a 22 round is.
Oh, yeah. I tell Josh all the time, hey, man, don't discount a 22. That's the number one sniper rifle you got out there.
Well, a 22 is not going to, make a huge exit wound, but it's going to will do a lot of damage while it's still inside.
Scrambling.
They've got kits now. These are great. Like if you want to prepare for the apocalypse, man, they're only like $200, $250 or so. You can get a nice, I think it's a Ruger 22, where the barrel disconnects and slides into the stock. And so you get a kit that's about, 18 inches, 20 inches long.
That's a Ruger survival rifle.
Yeah. They're fantastic to, just have in a case of an emergency.
It's essentially a 1022.
Well, that's what Josh has, a Ruger 1022 with a Leopold scope on it.
Oh, wow.
You want to talk about a nice
You drive
rifle.
nails with it.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, you could, Well, that's what I taught my sons to shoot with. It was a 1022 with iron. But,
you got to have the high velocity cartridges, or they'll get hung up in there.
But so either of you have any times when the world didn't seem to work the way it's supposed to work?
Aside from the latter thing, I there's nothing that stands out. I mean, I've had some weird experiences. I've had some, I've had a couple of times where the death was definitely on the table. But nothing crazy in terms of how the world worked in those situations.
Okay, let me then go back to something you were saying. When I was a kid, let's say age 7. Yeah, this is probably age 7. When I was a kid, I started developing this very OCD, very autistic kind of vision in my head of there being some kind of cosmic assembly belt or assembly line, and that there was a fully developed Victor inside all of these buckets on this assembly line.
Yes.
And that every few seconds, this Victor would die, and the assembly line would come along, grab this Victor, and deposit a new Victor where the old Victor had been. Okay, and I spent hours and hours and hours thinking about this and thinking about, well, how does it follow me around? How does it get the right angle? How does it go through people? Because I'm dying every few seconds. And so then it started to develop into, okay, well, maybe it's just out there and it doesn't work all the time. I mean, of course, if I'm out there, burning ants with my magnifying glass, why do I need to die when I'm doing that? But let's say something really does happen where I die. Well, okay. Well, the body's dead, but the mind just instantaneously shifts to the next Victor. And I'm in a different world. And I have no thought that anything's ever changed. But there's a dead body somewhere, but an animated Victor and an animated Victor mind just going on. And there'd be a...
We need Burke to talk about this.
Out there would be a string of 10, 20, 30 dead Victors, but this one just keeps going on.
What do you think drove that? What do you think started that way of thinking?
I don't have the slightest idea.
There.
All I know is that my brain works very strangely.
One thing that I've told Vic before is on the subject of autism. Okay. And he can back this up medically with my limited knowledge. But there's certain spectrums within a person with autism that takes them to a point to where the veil of true life reality, if I can use that term, so to speak, is very thin, and they can see themselves in the now and in the future. Does that make that kind of...
Sure, it makes sense.
Their perception is different.
See, no one can... I can't speak on that professionally because I'm not there, but Vic can probably speak on that reality that he faces sometimes.
Well, here's the thing. As a fully grown adult, I look at that mental process and I'm thinking, that's pretty weird for an 8-year-old to come up with that. And then but until I was 25, I just thought, well, everybody must be thinking about the fact that they're dying every few seconds and being replaced.
Right.
And because it doesn't seem unusual to you.
I can take this in two directions. Okay. The first direction is the Zen sort of view on life, right? You're changing. It's a new you every moment.
Okay, that's fair.
There's an aspect of life of like, you are no longer who you were 5 seconds ago because you have changed. And so the whole be here now, right? Be who you are right now, not who you were 5 minutes ago, because that person doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
Yeah, he does. He's on the assembly line.
Well, he's in the bin out back, but
he's still
who you're going to be in 5 minutes is still on the assembly line.
He's still hooked up.
But there's also, and I think this is I won't go too far with this, but I think that this is one aspect of society today. People with autism have a different view of life. Their interface to life is slightly different, and often feel uncomfortable in their own bodies. And so you have situations where they don't feel right. They don't feel like they are who they are. There's a disconnect between who they physically are and who they mentally feel like they are. And that may have been your mind's way of coping with that. And so you developed a way to rationalize why you don't feel like who you are. Well, that's because I'm not who I am. I'm who I am now. 5 seconds ago, that dude's dead.
Right. It takes at least 32 seconds to get used to your body, and I only get to live for 5 seconds every time.
So you're never used to it, yeah.
You're never used to your body. Father Mike, did you get that? I sent you a letter that a fan wrote to me.
Yes. Yes, I did.
What did you think about that?
I have to go back, and I know I replied back to you. I just can't remember it.
You didn't reply back.
Oh, I didn't.
So I didn't know if you had seen it or what, but that's okay. I just wanted you to have it in your bank of things to look. Well, what he was talking about was that he had an experience where, when he was about 5 or 6 years old, he became aware accidentally that there had been a child born before him.
Right.
That had only lived a few minutes because of some kind of terrible medical problem, and became very incensed that the family didn't talk about this brother. It's not his fault that he died. He's as much of a brother as we are. Why don't we include him in our remembrances? Why don't we include him? Why isn't there a picture of him up on the wall? This kind of stuff.
This was like a twin?
No. This child was born 5 or 6 years before.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, 5 or 6 years before. And one day he had an awakening. On New Year's Day. He had, gone to sleep, woke up, the whole world seemed different. He didn't seem to have an understanding of where or who he was. And he came to the belief that he was actually his brother.
Right.
Reincarnated.
More kind of a walk-in kind of thing. Look, like many of these things, I mean, this is very difficult esoteric stuff. Things of the mind can be very hard to understand. But his feeling was that he was his brother.
Yeah.
Which is a very strange thing. Yeah, to think that you, who are thinking about somebody else, is somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
You are somebody else. That's a very hard thing to even imagine.
Well, one of the things that I picked up when I was listening to the story was I could really see the guy going through some guilt. So
yes, mm-hmm.
That his brother died, and the parents were still grieving after all these years, and his life really didn't matter. So I think he was subconsciously becoming his brother. And
that's very possible. Mm-hmm.
That's just my take of it. I think it was more of a mental sense of him convincing himself that he was another person. He was his brother.
Mm-hmm. This is a very
different time.
This is a very normal, successful intelligent person.
Right.
Okay, we're not talking somebody with, major issues or anything. We're talking somebody who has lived a normal life, has had some painful things happen to him, has had some very good things happen to him, but had incorporated this idea that he was somebody else into his mind.
I agree.
Did he feel like he was different because of that? Or did he just feel like he had filled a different role previously?
One of the biggest
That's a really
things,
good question,
yeah.
and I can't tell you.
Well, one of the biggest things that I picked on was a lot of lack of self-worth in him as a standalone person, but yet he was trying to fulfill his lost siblings' role because of his parents. And that's unfortunately that's very dangerous. I mean, especially we as parents. It's kind of like I forget one story that I heard one time. Someone I forget who was telling me, but it was on one of our rundown shows, I believe, about a brother had died, but yet killed himself with a shotgun.
Oh, that was me telling you about a story from People of the Lie by M. Scott Peck.
Right.
Okay, where this very dysfunctional family, and the question is, are they deliberately dysfunctional or are they accidentally dysfunctional? And I don't know. But for his birthday, they gave him the shotgun that his brother had used to kill himself.
Right. And I say that because of the pressure that parents that loses a child can put on the surviving siblings.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sure that the letter that you received from this gentleman was very affected from that and from the loss, seeing it from his parents. And, it's sad. You can't deny grief, but you can't put your grief on your child either.
On a child.
Yeah.
Well, look, many parents. Well, Dr. Peck in the book talks to them about, hey, listen, don't you think that was a little insensitive?
Yeah.
To give that shotgun to your surviving son? And they got angry and they said, look, we're not sophisticated people. We don't have a lot of money to go out and buy new presents. That's the best thing we could give him.
We thought he'd be honored to have it.
And
my brother killed himself with it.
And Dr. Peck was saying, listen, you're either evil or you're stupid beyond all measure. Or both.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a very hard area.
It is, but thankfully we have this, guys, and I kind of like the way that the discussion went because there's good news in this as well, and through the grace of God, we can overcome things like this. There's hope that can be shared. There is a future that can be shared. There is a healing that can be shared. And even when we discuss the really hard things like this, I always want our listeners to understand that there is a future and a hope. Does that make sense to you? There's a future. There's a hope. And no matter what we go through, as even this young gentleman that was maybe even innocently mistreated. He took upon a great guilt upon himself for not being his brother. And
well, I think there's another aspect to it. Okay. I think there is among children a type of wonderfully benevolent innocence.
Yeah.
Okay. Of, my gosh, I had a brother. I never knew I had this brother. I'm getting to do all this stuff. I'm getting to live my life. I'm getting to, climb trees, throw baseballs, play in the snow, run with dogs, do all these things that a kid does. He never is going to get to do these things.
Right.
So what if I take him on as my inner persona? Then he gets to do these things.
True.
And so, okay,
Possibly.
there's just this idea of, let me lend part of my life to this brother that I never got to meet.
I agree with you.
I mean, there's a story that I think it's at this point it's become an apocryphal kind of thing.
True.
But in hospitals, and the story is that there's a child who's dying and needs blood, and it's a rare blood type, rare subantigens, but the brother has the exact same blood type, and his blood is a match. And so, trying to keep the child informed, the doctor goes to the child and says, "Hey, listen, your sister's really sick. We need to use some of your blood to try to help her get well. Is that okay? Do you mind if we use your blood to do so?" And he thinks about it. He says, "Okay, go ahead. Let me say goodbye to my mom and dad first." So she goes over and he hugs his mom and dad, and they take the blood and they give it to his sister. And he's waiting around. And he says, "Well, when do I die?" Okay, so in his mind,
I remember that. Yeah.
In his mind, and I believe it's true, and not only once, I believe it's probably true hundreds of times, because of the kinds of courage that I would see in kids at MD Anderson.
Yeah.
I mean, these just courage like you can't believe. And in their minds, there's no big deal about this. But he was willing to give up his life to save his sister. So I don't know. I found it a very touching kind of letter.
Right.
I know this person to be a person of very high character. And I was very honored that they would share that story with me.
Yeah, I agree.
But
that's a very touching story as well. I mean, that would have made me break down right there.
Well, not to make this a long discussion, because I know we need to wrap up, but just one thought is, you do hear stories of twins where the surviving twin feels a loss of a sibling that sometimes they didn't even know that they had.
Right. And he discusses that type of phenomenon.
Yeah, well, it does make it interesting to think about that thought being not a twin, but an older brother, someone who should have been born before them, but is not filling a place in their life that was meant to be.
Right.
A bond beyond, twinship or whatever it would be called.
Look, in my mind, my brother and my sons, sometimes I will be thinking about one while I'm actually thinking about the other. Okay, they get mixed up in my mind.
Vic, that's called old age. That's just
exactly.
well, this has happened for a long time. I mean,
wow, you really are old.
I really am old. But there's a movie called The Other. It's a pretty dang scary movie. It kind of works along these lines. I'll get Annabelle to give a.
Are you talking about the one with Nicole Kidman? The Others?
No.
I remember that one.
I like that movie.
I like that movie. That's a very atmospheric movie.
Yeah.
No, The Other is about
the house.
The same thing. The connection with twins and dead siblings and this kind of thing.
The Other is a 1972 psychological horror movie that truly brings the fear-based discomfort by the barrel full. Niles and Holland are a pair of precocious identical twins. They live on their uncle's farm, along with their widowed mother, their somewhat bratty cousin, Russell, and their psychic Russian grandmother, Ada. She has taught Niles how to astrally project himself into the minds of others, an activity she simply calls the game. The problem is, Holland is actually dead. And Niles is keeping him alive in his own mind through the use of the game. The result is, somewhat predictably, death all around, and one of the most shocking scenes in all of 70s cinema. Can anyone say changeling?
Well, gentlemen, anybody have anything that they must say before we leave?
No, sir. Just other than I have greatly enjoyed it again today.
All right. So, from Paranormal Rundown Central, this is Vic Hermanson, Dave Griffith, and Father Michael Birdsong, along with his son Joshua Birdsong, signing off until 2 weeks from now.
Absolutely. Enjoyed it, guys.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
How about a few moments of wholesome, American, Boy Scout-based, dungeon talk? It will keep you healthy, happy, and strong.
Let's hear the Gettysburg Address.
Fourscore
and how many years?
7 years ago, our forefathers set upon this
Set forth,
something.
Set forth upon this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty.
The
Here
end.
we go.
Exactly.
The end.
That all men are created equal. Now we're engaged in a great civil war. And blah, blah, blah,
Show
blah.
off.
There you go. Exactly, right? That's why we love you, Vic.
Well, I had to do that for Boy Scouts.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really?
Well,
And-
and that was a
Oh,
long
yeah.
time ago for me, though. And that in the preamble, I had to do that. Or was it the Cub Scouts had to do the preamble for?
Wasn't that part of the Sitting the Nat merit badge?
Something like that. Yeah.
Citizenship
something.
of the nation.
Yeah.
Citizenship of the nation.
I don't know. I have that in a box around here somewhere. I have all the boys' merit badge books. But I don't remember if that was one of the requirements now or not. There's lots of stuff like that.
I wasn't the first, but I was like the 10th person in the nation to get a communications merit badge.
Okay.
Because that was a new merit badge, and you had to learn all about, satellites and Morse. You had to learn Morse code, which I don't remember. I remember it just long enough to send a message for the guy who was overseeing the merit badge.
Well, when the zombie apocalypse comes down, you need to remember that.
Absolutely.
And
I have a ham radio license. Does that count for it?
Absolutely.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
Speaking of Boy Scouts, I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and they were talking about Bigfoot structures.
Uh-huh.
And where you find the
The
crosses,
X's
the
and
tree
the little
stuff up.
teepees and things, yeah.
I wouldn't doubt if that was in Upton County or Mayweather County where Longhorn is.
Oh, they find them all over. I know. I've got friends that investigate or do Bigfoot hunts or whatever up north of Pittsburgh, and I've seen pictures that they've taken of them that are clearly not normal. Trees don't fall that way. But one of the things that he commented on was that it's not Boy Scouts. Somebody had recommended it as Boy Scouts. But I do think that a handful of these, I'm not going to say a lot, but more than a few, are Boy Scouts doing their wilderness survival merit badge. Because I've watched them do it. Okay. and the point that he made on it was that they aren't tight enough to be a true shelter.
Well, that's what I was saying. What I was thinking is, I have seen the shelters. I've also built shelters, and those wouldn't pass.
No, they wouldn't. But how many Boy Scouts actually build a good shelter? I have watched Boy Scouts. Oh, no, I know, Vic, but you're a good Boy Scout, okay? Listen. There's two things here. One, you are like the cream of the crop of Boy Scouts.
Let's dig into the side of this earth.
Boy Scouts today are not what Boy Scouts were when you were a Boy Scout.
No.
How does that work? I mean, you go out there, you're already out there. Okay, you've got your new Boy Scout shorts and your little Boy Scout kerchief and all this kind of stuff. And the job is, all right, boys, we got to make ourselves a lean-to today, and we got to make it where we're not going to get wet during the next storm. Man, you're telling me there are boys around that doesn't just, like, I don't know.
Because after mine...
Just make them think, damn, I got to do that. I got to do it right.
No.
And so they're
I'll tell you
looking
why.
at...
Because after mine and your generation, they all went... Never mind.
Well, no, so there's two aspects of this. One is, if I remember correctly, wilderness survival is an Eagle required merit badge now. I think it always has been. I think it always has.
I think it always
an
has
Eagle
been.
required.
Yeah.
Which means that every scout that wants Eagle has to do it, whether they're interested in this stuff or not.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
You know, it's just one of the they're going to roll through. It's like, how many of them really enjoyed citizenship of the nation? No, most of them, it's just a checkbox so they can get their Eagle because they're working on a goal.
Well,
And that's a large number of scouts now.
When I was
Let me ask you. Go ahead, Father Mark.
When I was a Cub Scout, man, I was, in first, second, third grade, somewhere around there. At least for a couple of years, I remember. And we had to learn how to make some like a lean-to. Then we had to learn how to start a fire with our little flint stuff. Mm-hmm. We had to, any outdoor survival stuff. We were learning then. We were even learning life-saving skills in the water.
Yeah,
and that was a Cub Scout.
Yeah, you don't.
I was a
really
little
learn that
boy
stuff anymore.
I was a little boy learning how to properly throw a rope and all this kind of stuff. I'm like,
I don't think they let Cub Scouts play with fire anymore. But I can't remember. We did. Each Boy Scout troop fosters a pack, and you camp with them. I can't remember if we let them do fire starting or not, but it's very minimal, the stuff they do now. And so the idea.
Let me ask you a quick question before you finish.
Sure.
Has becoming an Eagle Scout become a DEI kind of thing, where it just doesn't really take all that much effort anymore?
Well, let's not call it DEI, because I don't think that's the driver. Okay, it's a generational thing. Everybody gets a participation trophy type deal. It has nothing to do with the other. It has to do with the fact that all the parents want to see their boy succeed, or girl now, because you can.
They
have
want to
Girl
see
Scouts.
that eagle.
They want that eagle, and so you have Eagle Mills, which just run the scouts through it. And the parents coach them all along the way, and it's parent driven, not scout driven.
God have mercy on us.
But within that, you have scouts that are doing this just because they have to. And so if they can spend the night under it, and it's not raining outside, and they don't need it for to manage the heat or whatever, you're going to get shelters that just look like a bunch of sticks leaning up against a tree, because I've seen them do it. And that's a fact of life. So I do think that some of these structures, and one of the points that he made was, well, I've never seen a scout out here, but it depends on, they only do it usually once a season. They'll do a troop will only do one wilderness survival merit badge night camp out, and they'll get everybody who's trying to get eagle that season to go through it, and they may choose different places each time where they go to do it. So I think that some of them are not all, but I do think that some of them are scouts.
Well,
It wouldn't surprise me if some were scouts. Now, I've also seen it where a whole damn tree is pulled up out of the ground and then put back upside down.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the scouts aren't doing that.
Pretty sure the scouts aren't doing that one.
Well, let me brag on the scouts in Georgia for a moment. Now, this was some 30 years ago when Josh was a baby, but 30 years ago, man, every spring when the scouts would come to Upson County at the place that you were at, they would brave the Flint, and to see them boys in a canoe braving the Flint, that impressed me. That impressed me a lot.
When you're saying braving the Flint, what are you talking about?
Flint River.
The Flint River.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm.
'Cause there's some easy class 3s on the Flint, and if it has rained prior, there's some easy class 4s, and I would dare say some class 5s.
I wouldn't take a class 4 in a canoe.
No.
Not a real class 4.
No. Especially not one of those
that's why
big...
no, it was not that bad, but they had to. I'm pretty sure they had some 3s easy on that trip, because that's an all-day thing from 109 Ridge, where they would probably be putting into 36. That's an easy 8-hour trip, unless you're nonstop.
Mm-hmm.
But I would watch them. They'd have a blast. They'd get up to next to each other when it got a little, and purposely turning each other over. I'm like, you go, boys. I mean,
We used to make catamarans.
Yeah.
Out of the canoes with these big old 17-foot aluminum grummins, which essentially are indestructible. Yeah, so we could make a really nice catamaran out of those things.
Sounds like fun. I loved canoeing. We used to do it growing up. We'd go on the James River and go bass fishing.
Oh, yeah. I never liked to canoe that much. It's because it was too unsteady for me until you got moving. Then I was fine. But just to climb in, I'm like, whoa. Don't you move.
Depends on your canoe. We had a Coleman. We had one of the, flexible composite ones.
They're a little wider at the bottom.
They're a little wider. Yeah. They're heavier than the aluminum ones. So they don't feel like they're as wobbly. I mean, you still have wobble, but they're much more
not
stable.
Like now, you're right. The Coleman ones makes me feel a little bit better, kind of like a Skidoo.
Yeah. Well, a buddy of ours, my dad's, had a Skidoo that was the Coleman. Mm-hmm. It was the same as ours, but it had the flat back end.
Right.
That you could put a motor on.
So a Skidoo is a cross between a canoe and a skiff? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. If you take a canoe and chop off about 1.5 feet of the rear and flatten it so that you can put a motor on it, you've got a Skidoo. That's the only difference. Right. At least
something like a trolling motor. Something like an electric trolling motor.
Little motor.
Yeah. And they work wonderfully. Wonderfully.
And that's one more paranormal rundown in the bag. There are going to be some changes at the Paranormal Rundown. There's going to be a whole new podcast called Paranormal Rundown Rabbit Holes. Let me play you the introduction to that.
Greetings to adventure, mystery, and truth seekers everywhere. My name is Avalon Leanne Danquah Smythe. Follow me. Let's listen, right now, to Paranormal Rundown Rabbit Holes. It's the very best and the funniest of the Paranormal Rundown podcast. I promise you, there's almost no danger. Almost, that is.
That will be coming soon. You might think of it as the best and the funniest of the Paranormal Rundown. Let's do this quick. Music, Lobo Loco, Public Domain, Smart Sound, Media Clips, Fair Use Doctrine. Write to us for so many reasons. Feedback at paranormalrundown.com. Until 2 weeks from today, this is Vic Hermanson. For the entire Paranormal Rundown crew, Dave, myself, Father Birdsong, Josh, Cedric, Avalon, we'll see you soon. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.